Hello again. We're up to study number 4, Israel in Babylon. It's part of the series, Israel, the Church and the Kingdom of God. The subtitle is The History and Future of God's People. I'm going through it. I've written 7 volumes. They're all available from the website shop www.barrettministries.org.uk. God rules in the affairs of men. Satan is the god of this world, but Satan's not in charge. God rules in the affairs of men. I believe Satan is only God's tool. He's under God. He's a created being. God's uncreated. I don't understand that. Science can't understand it, and my brain can't understand it, that God exists and is uncreated. But I accept it by faith. But God rules in the affairs of men, over good men and over bad men. God calls Cyrus a despot, mine anointed. Anointed means chosen, appointed. The anointed kings that were chosen, but God chooses bad people for his purpose as well as good. Cyrus, Nebuchadnezzar, we'll see. So we know it, but let's read Romans 13, 1-7. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, every soul, every person, for there is no power but of God. That's interesting. There's a study in every line, isn't there? There is no power but God. So every power in this world, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's presidents, whether it's the judicial system, they all get the power from God because God has all power. So if God has all power, there's none left for anyone else, only who he gives power. The centurion realised that, didn't he? He says, I'm a man with authority, but I'm under authority. And he recognised Jesus that had authority to cast out devils, but Jesus was under authority of God, his Father, and his God. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be, that's all powers, good and bad, are ordained of God, because God rules in the affairs of men. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works. If you keep the 30-mile speed limit, you can laugh at the law, because you're free, aren't you? You're only free if you break the 30-mile speed limit. That's a terror. I'm going to get a £75 fine. But if you keep the law, you're free. So the law isn't a terror to good works, good people. It's the terror to bad people, but to evil. Will thou not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. If you keep the lawgivers will praise you. The government will be pleased with you. You're keeping the laws of the land. God will be pleased with you. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. There has to be discipline. There has to be order. There has to be punishment for crime. We're in a sinful world. So don't fight against it. God's ordained it. What would it be if God said everyone do that which is right in his own eyes? You could murder people and justify it, because I think he should live. I think he's not fit to live, this man, so I've killed him. No consequence. I get away with it. That's how they live, by the conscience. God had to bring the law in. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore you must needs be subject, not only for wrath's sake, not only because you're frightened of the consequence, but for conscience sake, you need to do what's right. For this cause pay ye tribute also, pay your taxes. Christians shouldn't moan about taxes. Pay your taxes, give to Caesar what Caesar's, don't moan. Thank God you've got street lighting. I go to Africa and in India. They'd love to pay taxes. When their house is on fire, they all watch it burn. There's no ambulance going to come, no fire engine going to come. When a woman has a baby, 1 in, say, 7 die. Every family who's had 5 children in Africa or India, they've lost one through childbirth, through death, through malaria. You know, thank God we've got a medical service that's free in this country. I know you pay in Europe and America. For this cause pay your tribute. They are God's ministers attending continually upon this very thing. Thank God we've got a police force. I know they're not perfect, but in Africa and Uganda, you know, if there's a problem and you ring the police, when they come, you've got to pay them to come. You've got to bribe the police to come. It's thank God, pay your taxes willingly. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fair to whom fair, honour to whom honour. All right, God rules in the affairs of men. Daniel, because we're looking at Israel in Babylon. For those who've jumped into this study number 4, we've looked at Babylon starting in the Garden of Eden, because Eve chose to do her own thing. She made herself God. I know God said that, but I'll do my own thing. She became God. Daniel 4:7. This matter, this is God speaking through Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar, okay. I've just taken this out of context, but it's applicable. This matter is by degree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. Think of that. God rules in the affairs of men and sets up who he will, and he sets sometimes the basis of men. This is God. This is in the Bible, so it's not a doctrinal discussion, is it? It's plain statement. It's not a vision. It's not up to interpretation. God rules in the affairs of men. He sets good people and bad people. All powers are ordained of God. That's hard for some Christians to accept. They think that God puts good men and the devil puts bad men. But the devil doesn't put anyone there. He only thinks he does. But God's in charge, overall control. The devil's blind, isn't he? He's a Walter Mitty. He believes his own lies. If you're a liar from the beginning, a compulsive liar, in the end you believe your own lies. You're a Walter Mitty, aren't you? So the devil doesn't know it. He reads the Bible and he thinks it's the truth, and he shoots himself in the foot. Paul said, if the princes of this world, the demons, had have known, they'd never crucified the Lord of glory. They helped God save the world by killing his son. They were part of salvation. The demons didn't realise. They thought, we've got to put out this light. We've killed the light. The darkness has won. We've killed the light. They put nails in their own coffin. They seal the fate. Now is the prince of this world judged. See, he shoots himself in the foot, the devil, and he thinks he's running the world. He's under God. Megalomaniac, they believe in their own grandeur and the power, don't they? That's the devil. He's a megalomaniac. He believes in his own triumph. He believes he'll take over the world, and he will. And then the little angel will lock him up for 1,000 years. He's completely deluded. Never fear the devil. Fear God. He's the judge. He'll send the devil to judgment. So Egypt, I think everyone who's been to Bible college will know that everyone says Egypt is a type of the world. Pharaoh is a type of Satan. But God put Israel in Babylon, not in Egypt. Why? Why didn't he send them back to Egypt under Satan? I'll tell you why. Because they were redeemed from the world. So to send you back to the world is to unredeem you. It is like, I've not chosen you, I've rejected you. So when God divorced Israel, he didn't send them back to the world. That's annihilating, eradicating, or negating the salvation, isn't it? You're redeemed from the world. So if God puts you back in the world, you've lost your salvation, haven't you? So he sends them to Babylon. That's where the church is. The church, the backslidden church, is not in the world. When the church want the world, God doesn't put them back in the world. They're in Babylon, because Babylon is the mixture. They're serving God and serving the world. It's the mixture. Babylon is confusion, the mixture. That's what it means. Babel. We say, oh, the babbling. It's indistinguishable. It's confusion, isn't it? You're speaking and we don't know what you're saying. You're just babbling. So Babylon. So Babylon, the counterfeit religion is Babylon. God says, if you don't want to serve me, the one true God, you'll get religion. So Babylon is religion. The whore, the counterfeit, the prostitute instead of the virgin bride. Well, it was God that set up Babylon in Nebuchadnezzar's time. He sent them to Babylon. I'm going to surprise some Christians. Daniel 2:37. This is what he said to Daniel. In another part, I think it's Ezekiel or Isaiah, I've not got the scripture, but it says, Babylon was a golden cup in the hands of the Lord. Not a brass cup, an iron cup, a golden cup. Gold is the glory of God, isn't it? The temple was full of gold, typifying the glory of God. Silver talks of redemption, doesn't it? The silver coin, the redemption money. But gold is the glory of God. And this is what God said to Nebuchadnezzar. He saw this, for those who don't know, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He'd taken Israel, the creme de la creme, the intelligentsia, into the royalty, into Babylon. The intelligentsia, those that could be trained for 3 years to serve under Nebuchadnezzar. That's what they do. When we won the war with Germany, then we took all the scientists from Germany, secreted their way through the Catholic Church to America. And they designed the atomic bomb, didn't we? You know, when a conquering country takes over, they take all the intelligence or all the scientists. Why kill the scientists? Kill the common people, but keep the scientists and take them to your own country. That's what all kingdoms do, and that's what Nebuchadnezzar did. And he said, it'll take 3 years to train them in the language of the Chaldeans, change their names to serve the gods. Daniel means God is my judge. So he changed Daniel's name to Belteshazzar, which means Bel is a pagan god, so Bel is my judge. So he wanted to change the name, and name denotes character. So he wanted to Babylonianize them so they could stand in the court, learn the culture and the gods of Babylon, and be in the government of Babylon. And Daniel had interpreted the dream. The dream was as of a statue. The head was gold, the breast was silver, the thighs were brass, the 2 legs were iron, and the feet and toes were iron and clay. That was a statue. And Nebuchadnezzar couldn't interpret it. And all the magicians couldn't interpret it. And Daniel says, I serve the God of heaven. He can understand dreams. I'll interpret it. And this is what he said to Nebuchadnezzar. Thou, O king, it's you. You art the King of kings. That's an amazing statement. That's a title of Jesus, isn't it? King of kings and Lords of lords. So either he's saying Nebuchadnezzar is Jesus, King of kings, not God. Jesus is King of kings and Lords of lords. So he's either saying you're Jesus or the Antichrist. And I believe he's saying, you're the counterfeit. You're not Christ, but I'll give you the title because you're the King of kings, the counterfeit. Jesus is the King of kings, we know. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom. So God gave Nebuchadnezzar, a type of the Antichrist, a kingdom, power, strength and glory. But that belongs to Jesus. Our Father which art in heaven, for yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory. He gave it to Nebuchadnezzar. Can you understand that? Can you believe it? That everything that Jesus would inherit, eventually, he gave to Nebuchadnezzar. This is amazing, isn't it? This is in Daniel's time, 400 or 500 years before Jesus. The God of heaven has given you a kingdom, the power and the strength and the glory. You're the counterfeit. The kingdom, the power and the glory, the counterfeit. That's why the Catholic Church called Europe Christendom, the kingdom of Christ. They wanted the power to set kings up and depose them. The Pope is Antichrist for me. It's never the definite article in the Bible. I don't know if you know. It never says the Antichrist. It's always a small a, Antichrist, because it's a spirit and it's in every generation. John said in his epistles, there's many Antichrists. Of course there is. Whoever's head of the counterfeit is Lucifer, is the king of Babylon, is Antichrist. So there's the names. King of Babylon, Antichrist, Lucifer. The king of Babylon is therefore, and that's his other names. This is the context of Lucifer. I have got it in the study. I've got an hour's study on it, so I'm just touching it to whet your appetite and think about it. All right. And it shall come to pass in that day. That day is when God restores Israel. If you know Isaiah, it's all about the judgment of Israel and the restoration when Jesus comes and sets up the kingdom of Israel. So trust me, or check it out, it's the restoration of Israel. And when God does it, and in that day it shall come to pass, the Lord shall give thee rest from the sorrow and from fear and from hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve. The Holocaust, what Rachel's trouble that's coming. I believe the tribulation is not for the world and it's not for the church. The church has always been in persecution somewhere in the world. I believe the persecution, the great tribulation in the Bible, it's only mentioned once, great tribulation, and I believe it's Israel. Rachel weeping for her children before the last Holocaust, before Jesus comes, the last judgment on Israel, before he redeems them. I can't explain that now. I've not got time. That's where I believe. The Lord shall give thee rest. Thou shalt take up this proverb. So when God gives them rest in the millennium, when God comes and restores them after the punishment, then you'll take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. So it's this counterfeit who rules religions. How has the oppressor ceased? Because God's going to judge Babylon, isn't it? Revelation 17 and 18, God judges Babylon. How has the oppressor ceased? How has the golden city ceased? How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? So it's a proverb against the king of Babylon. So he calls the king of Babylon Lucifer. It's a nickname. It's either Jesus or the Antichrist, because Lucifer means light bearer. Our brother Joe will know, if you go to Holland, and the Lucifers are matches, aren't they? The Lucifers, the lights. They call them Lucifers. They say, yeah, you know the song, pack up your troubles in an old kit bag. Pack up your troubles in an old kit bag. The army song. They talk about the Lucifers. The matches, the lights. So he calls him Lucifer, light bearer. So Jesus is the light of the world. So it's either Jesus, Lucifer is Jesus, or the anti-Jesus, the Antichrist. Can you see? Son of the morning. The Satan comes as an angel of light. He comes as Lucifer. But it's a man, son of the morning. How art thou cut down to the ground that did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I'll ascend unto heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars. I'll sit also on the side, mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north. That's Jerusalem. So the Antichrist, Paul says 2 Thessalonians 2, that day won't come, Jesus won't come again until the man of sin sits in the temple of God, proving that he is God. So it's about, Satan won't do that, will he? It's the man of sin or the Antichrist. I will ascend above the heights, I'll be like the Most High God. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Hell is not, it's Hades there, the place of the dead, not Gehenna, you know, the rubbish tip. So you'll die. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, so when the Antichrist is destroyed, is this the man? It's about the king of Babylon. And he calls him Lucifer. He says, this the man that made the earth to tremble. So Satan's not a man. It can't be Satan, can it? But it's the Antichrist. Paul confirms it. He'll sit in the seat of God, claiming that he is God. I'm the God. And it says the worms will eat you, you come in, you'll rot like any other man. The church, God's people Israel and the church have never broken free from Babylon. and we were never meant to break free from Babylon. When God sent Judah back to Israel, they brought Babylon with them. They taught the Babylonian Talmud. They brought the doctrines of Babylon into Israel. They changed Hebrewism into Judaism. The Pharisees ruled, and the Pharisees were formed in Babylon. There was no Pharisees before that. They were formed in Babylon, and they Babylonized Israel when they came back. I must explain. The Jews went to Babylon and came back. Israel didn't go to Babylon. The 10 tribes who were a separate nation, there were 2 distinct nations. Judah and Benjamin were the 2 tribes, the southern kingdom. They were taken to Babylon. But years before, Israel, the 10 tribes, the separate nation, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and took people to Assyria, and they never went back to Israel. They migrated around the Caspian Sea into Europe. We could be the lost 10 tribes. There's studies on it as the lost 10 tribes. They never went back to Israel, so a Jew is not Israel. Israel is not a Jew. He's the king of Israel, God, and he'll bring the 2 sticks together. I don't know if you know, Ephraim and Manasseh. God will take the 2 sticks, Joseph and Ephraim, is it, and make one nation again. But at the moment, the 2 nations, and Israel are lost. We only know about the Jews. I'm getting outside the study. Daniel 2:37. Why have God's people never got out of the counterfeit, never got out of religion? And every revival reverts back to religion. Thou art king of heaven, King of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, the power and strength and the glory. Let's carry on now. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven hath he given unto your hand. So he gave Nebuchadnezzar the whole creation, the beasts of the field, wherever men dwell, and he has made thee ruler over them all. Babylon rules. That's what God said. You're a king of kings, you're the counterfeit, and I've given the kingdom to you. My people Israel, my wife, don't want me, so I've put her away. And I've given the kingdom to you, the kingdom, the power and the glory, to religion. So we're all born in religion, aren't we? We're not born in relationship, we're born in religion. When you get saved, it's in religion, in the established church, Baptist denominations. And that's all right. We're in the world, but not of it. You can be in Babylon and not of it. Daniel was in Babylon and not of it. He wouldn't be Babylonianized. He stood up against it. We've got to stand up against religion, haven't we? By religion, I don't mean Christianity. I'm a follower of Christ, so I call myself a Christian. I'm sure you know what I mean. I'm not anti-church. The people. I'm anti-religion organisation. And made thee ruler of them. Thou art the head of gold. Now that's significant. He's the head of gold. So the next empire, that was Babylon, wasn't it? The head of gold. The next empire, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. That's the Medes and Persians, the Media and Persians. That's the breast of silver. But it's all a statue of Babylon. The head still rules, doesn't it? The head rules the body. So Nebuchadnezzar, the spirit of Nebuchadnezzar, was transferred to the next empire, the breast of silver. And another 3rd kingdom of brass, that's the Greek Empire, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron, that's Rome. The iron fist of Rome, the Bible talks about. I put you in the iron furnace. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, as iron that breaketh all things, shall it break into pieces and bruise. And whereas thou saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. So it's a timeline, the statue is a timeline of history. So we've got the Babylonian Empire, the Medes and the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and we're still under the legs of Rome, because Imperial Rome, military Rome, morphed into religious Rome. The pontiffs, The Roman emperors became the popes. They morphed. Pontifex Maximus, I think. It's the Roman title, the Roman Catholic Church. So we're still under the Roman Catholic Church is the Church of Babylon. I've got cardinals who say that. Essentially, we're the Church of Babylon. They say that. They paganised Christianity, brought all the doctrines in of Babylon. The calendar, they changed the calendar from a lunar calendar that was God's calendar to a solar calendar. And it says that the stone will come and smash the feet. Why doesn't it smash the head? If I shoot your feet, you don't die. If you shoot your legs, you don't die. You've got to shoot you in the head. That's where they point the revolver, don't they? To know you could miss your heart, but you can't miss your brains. If you put your gun to your temples, you're going to die. Why doesn't the stone smash the head like David killed Goliath? He threw a stone at his head. Because the feet, it says when the stone hits the feet, the whole statue disintegrates, because that's where we are now in the timeline. We're in the feet of clay and iron. And so Jesus will come and strike the feet. In other words, he'll strike Babylon when he comes again. But the whole statue will fall and never be any more. Babylon's finished then. No more mixture. He that is holy, let him be holy still, holy forever. He that is unclean, let him be unclean forever. That's what Revelation says. Now's the time you can be in religion or out of it, but there's no mixture, no Babylon in the millennium or heaven. So that's to show we're in Babylon. Revelation 18. After these things I saw another angel come down from heaven. So that's a prophecy in Daniel. Here's the fulfillment that hasn't happened yet. So we're in between Daniel and this prophecy. But we're near it. I believe we're very near it when Jesus comes and destroys Babylon. Babylon's destroyed just before Jesus comes. Because when Babylon's destroyed, it says, rejoice you kingdoms. And then the seventh trumpet sound and Jesus comes from heaven with his armies to take over the world. The kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of Christ. So we're near that time now, near the 6,000 years end. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong, Babylon the Great is fallen. The statue's going to go. There's no more religion, no more counterfeit. God's going to deal with it. And the real Jesus will be established. The man of sin who claims he's Christ will be exposed. He's fallen and become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and the cage of every unclean bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of her fornication. All nations. Did you know the Catholic Church are the only city-state? Vatican is a city-state. It doesn't belong to Italy. It's a city-state, an independent country. It's the only country in the world that has diplomatic relations with every other country. America have cut off certain countries. We don't have diplomatic relations. Every nation use the Vatican, the spy network, because they have diplomats, relationships with every other country. They sit kings up and depose them. The Pope has power to abrogate what Jesus says. I've got quotes from cardinals that said the Pope is Christ on earth, is in place of Christ, and he has power to abrogate and change what Christ did. That's why they changed the Sabbath to Sunday. It's a Catholic day. The cardinal said that I wrote. He said the Pope has power to change what Jesus said. Because he's now Jesus Christ on earth. He's God's representative on earth. So by that, he's entitled. If he's God's representative on earth, Jesus is dead in heaven. So he has got power. But he's the counterfeit, isn't it? And the kings of the earth have committed fornication. The kings of the earth with Babylon, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And when he falls, it's amazing. And I heard another voice saying, come out of her, my people. Now's the time to get rid of religion in my life, in your life, and get into a pure relationship with God. that you're not partake of his sins and you receive not our plagues. So we're in Babylon. So God expects his people to be in Babylon in religion at the end days, because he says, come out of her, my people. So he expects his people to be in Babylon, and we find we are. Now's the time to come out. I don't mean you leave anything. You've got to get rid of Babylon in your life. Like I don't leave the world and live in a monastery. I've got to get the world out of me, because I think like the world, and I've got to have the mind of Christ. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. And it goes on right to 24. I'll miss that. You can read it. And it's every commodity, cinnamon and oil and wine and wheat, and the souls of men. Babylon is trading in the souls of men. It's amazing. It's a long list. It doesn't have to, the oil and the wheat and the wine and the cumin and the spices, and it covers everything. The whole world commerce will collapse because Babylon controls the commerce. You have no idea what the Catholic Church control. They're the biggest conglomerate in the world. Their art treasures alone would feed all the world's hungry. Nobody knows the wealth. They control every country. Anyway, that's another study. When will the Babylon end? Well, when he's judged. Isaiah 11. I'm saying Old Testament scriptures because that's in the future, but here's the prophecy of it. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. This is when Jesus comes in Jerusalem. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. The glory of the Lord, the character of the Lord, the glory is the character. We change from glory to glory, character to character, little by little. That's the millennium. The character, the glory of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. So he's prophesying the millennium. Habakkuk 2:14. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. He says the same thing. That's the millennium. So that's when Babylon falls. Until Babylon falls, the glory of the character of the Lord can't be over all the earth, can it? So, let me come to the second part of the study. The remnant in the remnant. There's always a remnant. If you look at the whole Bible, there's always a remnant come through. God delivered 3.5 million people, it's computed, out of Egypt. Only 2 got in the promised land of the original. I mean, the children got in, but only 2 of the people that God redeemed out of Egypt went through. So it's always the remnant that come through. The rest are in Babylon. They wanted the gods of Egypt, didn't they? They left Egypt, but Egypt didn't leave them. They wanted to go back all the time. They were rebellious. They worshipped Molech in the wilderness. Can you imagine that God's people were passing the children, sacrificing to the demons, sacrificing them to Molech? That's to Molech. They burned the children as a sacrifice. This is God's people. Don't think God's people can't do terrible things when they backslide. Dancing round a golden calf, offering the children to Molech. In the wilderness, it says in the New Testament. But there's always a remnant come through. And when God put Israel or Judah in Babylon, there was a remnant, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego and Daniel, 4 of them that stood up. They were the remnant that went through. Daniel went back to the promised land, and Daniel was instrumental in the return of Judah to Israel, because restoration always comes with intercession. I've written 3 books on intercession. I don't want to get into the subject, but Daniel's intercession brought Israel back. Daniel 9:2-3. I'm sure you know that when Daniel went to Babylon to be Babylonianized, he had the king's meat and the king's wine, and Daniel says, I don't want it. Not because it wasn't kosher. He was training to be in the government. He was a Jew, and he could have said, look, I don't eat meat with the blood. Will you take the blood out, drain your blood? He could have had kosher meat. There's no such thing as kosher wine, is there? It's just wine. So he said, I won't defile myself with the king's meat or the wine. But it wasn't because it wasn't Jewish, it wasn't kosher. It was because he didn't want to live that kingly lifestyle. He said, I want to live a humble lifestyle. I'm in exile. I'm away from God's people. We're backslidden. How can I rejoice and live like a king when I'm backslidden? We hanged our harps up on the willows. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? That's what Israel said. How can we rejoice? They said, oh, sing some of the songs of Israel. We know you're musical in Israel. Play your harps and sing for us. They said, how can we sing the Lord's songs? We're in a strange land. We're exiles. We can't sing the Psalms of David. We're under enemy occupation. God's brought us to our knees. And they were saying, dance to us, sing. And we hanged our harps upon the willows. We don't want to sing. We're wailing and groaning because we're under God's judgment. Daniel 9, 2 and 3. So Daniel says, I don't want, in the first year in the reign of Darius, the first year of his reign, I think it was Darius, Daniel understood by the books the number of the years whereby the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. The last study worked out that God mathematically computed it for the 400 and odd years they didn't keep the Sabbath. God says, now you'll keep them. 70 years will fulfill that. The scales will balance. And after 70 years, your judgment's over. I'll restore you again. When you've had a smack bottom, then your dad gives you a hug and says, shake hands, it's all right. You've had your punishment. Let's go move on. So when Daniel was in Babylon 70 years, he must have read Jeremiah a few times. 70 years. He went as a young man, maybe 18, maybe 17. So he's now 90, around 90. I don't know what age. We don't know what age he went in. But he's around about 90. And he's obviously read the Isaiah and Jeremiah. And suddenly he read it, that Jeremiah said, 70 years are your punishment. And Daniel thought, wow, it's 70 years. I've been 70 years in Babylon. It's time for the restoration. So he said, I set my face to the Lord to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. When you realise the times comes, the church will have to intercede. So it's a principle, isn't it, for the all revival comes from intercession. If you read the history of revivals, there's people praying in secret and interceding. It's not a sovereign move of God. It is because God puts it in the heart. God gave Daniel revelation after 70 years of being and reading the Bible. He'd never sussed it out. And then he said, 70 years. I've been 70 years this year. So I set my face to seek. Ezra 1. So in the reign of Cyrus, so this is the next dynasty, Daniel lived through Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, Cyrus, the Persian and the Mede, and to the reign of Darius. Daniel outlived a few kings. Amazing. Now the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, so this is the next empire, the breasts of silver, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. Can you see how it's fulfilling prophecy? The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation through all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven, he was a despot, but God said, he's mine anointed. I've chosen him, a bad man, to fulfill my purposes. So Babylon released Israel back to Israel, or Judah back to Judah. The Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth. So he's showing that he's a dynasty. He gave Nebuchadnezzar all the kingdoms of the world. And the next empire says the same, because it's the same statue of Babylon. That's why the popes rule the world, because it's the statue of Babylon. The God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth. I'm part of Nebuchadnezzar's spirit. Another dynasty, but another spirit. And he charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. And Ezra and Nehemiah took all the gold and the silver back to build the temple. But it was Daniel's prayer years before praying and seeking God and confessing the sins that allowed God to do it. Intercession is not a type of prayer. People don't know the difference between petition and intercession. Petition is asking God for what you want. Lord, will you save my cat and Auntie Molly or whatever it is? Lord, intervene in the war in Gaza and Israel. We're praying, we're petitioning God for our needs or our perceived needs. God may want the war to carry on, I don't know. But petition is asking God for your needs. Intercession is the Holy Ghost praying you God's prayers so God can bring about what he already planned. Do you understand it? God burdens people. The prophet said the burden of the Lord, the burden of the Lord. And God gave Daniel revelation so Daniel would plead with God and say, forgive us, we're backslidden, we deserve it, you're God, and we've disobeyed you. It's right we're in Babylon. Have mercy upon us. So God burdened Daniel to pray what God had already wanted to bring about, because God doesn't want to work in isolation with humanity. He made us to work with him. So he burdens people who are godly so that they can pray and bring about what God's already had in his mind. So intercession is God praying, you praying God's prayers, and God's prayers always get answered. If you pray God's prayers, you don't have to know it, but if God burdens you, you pray and that's God's prayer, it's to bring God's plan to pass. And so that's the remnant. That's why Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, if you don't know, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego went through the fiery furnace. They were refused to bow. Daniel wouldn't stop praying because he was interceding. It's after this. So he says, I'm not stopping my intercession. It wasn't just, I'm not praying for 30 days. He knew he had to intercede, and he stood up and he got put in the lion's den. And we think that's a children's story, but it's actually for us. Don't pray, don't meet together till the pandemic's over. That's a perfect parallel. Don't pray, don't meet together, close the churches, only for a period of time. When the pandemic's over, you can open again. That's what he said to Daniel. Don't pray for 30 days. Daniel thought, oh well, it's only 30 days. I could do with the rest. I'll pray again after 30 days. But he said, no, I'm not stopping. Because God's law is higher than the man's law. You obey man's law until it goes against God's law, because you always obey the highest authority. If you're a manager of a firm and the manager over you tells you to do something, and then the owner of the firm tells you to do the opposite, you do the opposite because he's the highest power. So if the government say don't meet together, and God says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together, then you've got to obey the higher authority. You obey authority unless it usurps God's authority. Because when a government go against God's authority, they lose their authority to govern. So if the government say you've all got to sign that you're bisexual, I will disagree. I won't sign it. I'm disobeying the government, but the Bible says obey the government. Yeah, but they lost their authority because they're asking me to do something that higher authorities told me not to. Can you see the principle? So when we get the next pandemic, that's probably coming in a few months, they planned it. They planned the first one. They planned, Bill Gates says there's definitely another pandemic. Wise as serpents, gentle as doves. I'm not going to forsake the assembling of myself together. And so much the more as the day approaches. The day's approaching, so we've got to go underhand. I can never understand why Christians in a Muslim country want to build a church. It's like saying, come and bomb us. The early church went underground with persecution when they were being thrown to the lions. They met in caves, they went underground. When the communists took over Russia, they met in the woods, didn't they? You don't say, shoot me, build a church and bomb us. It's stupid. It's religion. We've got to make a name for ourselves. We've got to show we're Christians. There's a time to be underground as a Christian. There's a time to stand and get shot. Joseph stood up to Potiphar's wife time after time after time, but the time came when he had to run. Thank God he did, because he'd have slept with her. because he resisted a lot of times, so this time he must have felt weak, or she did something more and aroused him, and he thought, I'm out of here. There's a time to run, there's a time to go underground, there's a time to stand, and God needs to show you which is which. And I'm outside the study. So it's interesting because the remnant came back to Judah. I can't go into it, but Ezra said, whoever's of a willing heart, because don't forget when God sent Judah to Babylon, I can't dig all the scriptures, it'd take double the time, but God said, don't rebel against the king of Babylon. Don't rebel against religion. Don't rebel. I'll put you in it. It's your punishment. God's people always don't want the mixture. So he said, I've put you in Babylon. Build houses, marry wives, plant vineyards, settle in Babylon. So when the call came to go back, Ezra said to them, whoever has a willing heart. Some of people had started a business. Some had married Babylonian women. So there was a big price to pay. They weren't going back. They weren't emigrating. They were going back to work to rebuild the temple. That was the purpose. It was a forbidden land. The temple was burnt down. The houses were derelict. So they had to, it wasn't just emigration. So it said whoever is a willing heart, and most of them wouldn't pay the price. It tells you exactly 132,353. That's not the number, I've made it up. But it says to the man, it's not a round number, 10,000. It tells you exactly the number. And it names them all. And Daniel's one of them that went back. So it was only a remnant because people were happy in Babylon. People don't want to leave Babylon. When you've got religion, it's safe in it. It's safe. We all believe the same, don't we? So you feel safe. When people contradict you, you feel insecure. Well, I don't believe this and I don't believe that. Religion has to conform you. That's the Latin word. Religion, the Latin word, it means to bind, to adhere to. You've got to all believe the same. Catechism, what is God? God is this. What is salvation? Salvation is this. We've got the proof text, the catechism. All religions have the catechism because they've got a statement of faith. If you believe this, you're a good Baptist. If you believe this, you're Pentecostal because you believe in the initial evidence with speaking in tongues. The Baptists don't, but they're better than the Methodists because they baptize full immersion. So it's a statement of bias, not a statement of faith. Don't think it's a statement of faith. It's a statement to show why they're different than other denominations. This is my statement of faith. You may interpret it differently than me, but we all believe this is our statement of faith. I don't need to show why I'm different than you, do I? That's a statement of bias, because I'm willing to change all my statements of faith, because I'm not God. I'm on a journey. So volunteers only apply. So only a remnant went back, and it numbers them. You can check up, read Ezra and Nehemiah. It tells you them all. The next study is about Jesus, because we've looked at Babylon, God's wife. God divorced his wife, put her in Babylon. So we come right through to Jesus now, looking for his wife. Jesus died to get his wife. Jesus came he came to do his Father's will. He was an obedient son, but he set his face like a flint. Why? For the joy that was before him. What's the joy? Not the cross. He set his face like a flint and was obedient to get his inheritance, to get his bride and rule the nations with a rod of hand. I'll give you the nations of the world for your inheritance. David prophesied that Jesus would rule the nation. So he set his face like a flint. He didn't want to die. He said, Father, take it from me. Nevertheless, I'll do what you want, but it's willing to do it. I've set my face like a sins and die for the sins of the world because I'll get my bride. And I'll rule the nations with a rod of hand. So Jesus had a different motive of God. John 3:16, for God so loved the world. It didn't say Jesus so loved the world. He was an obedient to God's plan. God loved the world and sacrificed his son to do it. I come not to do my will, but the will of the Father who sent me. And he clearly in the Garden of Gethsemane wanted to get out of it. He said, you can do anything. You can save the world another way. Nevertheless, I'll do your will. So he was obedient to the death of the cross. So he's worthy to receive glory, honour, riches, praise. We've looked at that. So Jesus came to get the remnant out of Babylon. He came to get the fruit, the character. John 15:16. You've not chosen me, but I've chosen you. This is what he said to his disciples. They handpicked them. When the man said, I'll follow you wherever you go, he said, next, I'll bury my father. He said, let the dead bury the dead. Come now or forget it. Jesus handpicked his disciples. They didn't pick themselves. You can't pick yourself to be a disciple. You can decide for Jesus, but you can't pick yourself to be a disciple. Thousands of people followed Jesus, believed in him, believed he was the Son of God, the Messiah. But only disciples were handpicked. You've not chosen me. This is to the disciples in the upper room after Passover. So it's to 11 people in the upper room, the foundation of the bride. You've not chosen me, but I've chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and your fruit should remain. Jesus is always talking about fruit. There's a parable. The man put a vineyard, that's God. The vineyard speaks of Israel. And he sent his servants to gather the fruit. That's the prophets. Bring forth fruits meet for repentance. That was the last prophet, John the Baptist. Where's the character? Where it's the fruit? You're bitter, you're fighting, you're pharisaical, you're religious. Where's the fruit? Where's the character of God? And they stoned the prophets and beat them. And in the end, the man says, I'll send my son. They'll reverence him. This is the parable. And they said, this is the son. Let's kill him, and the heir will be ours. The kingdom will be ours. Babylon, the Pharisees were part of Babylon. They killed Jesus to take the kingdom. That's why the Catholic Church called Europe the Christendom, the kingdom of Christ. Charlemagne changed it to Europe, after the Greek myth of Europa. I won't go into that, but that's significant because Europa got raped. So who's going to rape Europe? You've not chosen me, I've chosen you to bring fruit. And the prophets were always coming to bring fruit, but they wouldn't come out. Only a remnant came out. It's Luke 20, verse 9. Then he began to speak to the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard, let it forth to the husbandman, and went into a far country for a long time, 2,000 years. So that's the end of the study. The next study will be about Jesus, because we're looking at the Son, looking for his bride. Have a wonderful week. God bless you. Tune in for the next study.